Well, all right, kiddos, it's time to sharpen up those edges and grease up your chains. We are going to live it up with mountain life. Dropping in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
All right, mountain lifers, mountain lovers, movers and shakers, and outdoor risk takers, how you doing? This is Feet Banks coming back, and you are listening to Live It Up with Mountain Life, the Mountain Life podcast. It's autumn, winter's coming, Halloween is here, Shred movie premieres are happening, people are getting back together in real life, anticipation is in the air. How are you handling it? Are you sleeping with your skis? Have you strapped into your board on the living room carpet? What's going on? Around here, we're celebrating a 15-year anniversary of Mountain Life Coast Mountains, so that's pretty exciting. That first mag was just 16 pages of content, 16 pages of ads, and look where we are now. A lot more gray hairs, a lot more adventures under the belt, a lot more new friends, a lot of good times, and you don't even need to pick up a magazine anymore. We can beam ourselves right into your ear holes, so that's a lot of fun, isn't it? As well, speaking of magazines, I want to give a shout out to the latest Mountain Life title to drop, the newest member of the family. That's Mountain Life Rocky Mountains. They just put out issue number 1. So congrats to Christy, Aaron, and Keith, the team out there in Canmore. And if you can find that one, if you're in that area, pick it up. It's looking good. I've seen the first cover, and it's a work of art. And that's the course we're charting this week on the pod. It's Artist Week. That's because, art is important. It's all around us. It's not just important to those of us who create magazines and need writers and photographers and filmmakers and designers and artists to fill our pages, but also to everyone out there in the natural world. I mean, who hasn't heard an athlete talk about putting a fresh track into an untouched powder field the way a painter would stroke paint down a canvas? Is that art? Or is it what we call style? Or is style just a form of art? It's hard to say. Art has a lot of definitions. I found one on the internet that's going to work for us today. Might not work for us tomorrow or next year or last week, but that's the magic of art. It's hard to nail down. But for now, let's go with the premise that art is the creation of something using skill and imagination. That's it. Yeah. Hopefully, it's also meaningful or looks good or both, but it doesn't have to be. So the art of the line in the new snow, choosing exactly how and where to go. It definitely takes skill and imagination. Does it mean anything? It does to the person doing it. It does to the people behind that person. Are you an artist when you move through the mountains, across the water, through the trees? Are you following an artist? Maybe you are. There's a lot more similarities between the art world and the outdoor kingdom than a lot of people think. There's the jocks and the art. Actually, they mix together. Not that the outdoor world was really jocks, was it? It never used to be anyhow. I'm not sure about it now. Some of those sports are a little bit sportified and a little bit less soulified, but that's for another pod. But, you get out there into the wilderness and get into that flow state of focus where everything drops away, where you're just right there doing that one thing that you're doing, not worrying about anything else. That happens during the creative process too. It can happen out on an adventure. It can happen at an easel, at a keyboard, playing an instrument. And it's like our guest this week says, there is more than one way for the spirit to connect with itself or with everything else. That guest, awesomely, is Levi Nelson. Levi is a contemporary Indigenous artist from the Lil'wat Nation out here in BC. And there's definitely no doubt his paintings are both skillfully created, beautiful, and also very meaningful. This art and this artist has a lot to say. And it's not coincidentally then in a relatively short time, but by artist standards, lots of artists have to die to get noticed. Levi is definitely still with us and still quite young. He's become one of the most exciting artists in this country and is just kicking off the first semester of his master's degree at Columbia University in New York City, which is a world away from where he grew up and where he's been working in a little studio in his family land in Mount Currie, BC, which is where I sat down for this talk, and we'd never met before. It's always great, I think, to get to talk to somebody in their own space, where everything in the room is a piece of who they are and the journey they've had. And when that person is an artist, it's even better because the work is literally right there all around us. You don't get that on a Zoom call. Before we get into it, though, I want to say I think it's important for this pod that Levi and I discuss a lot of his artwork, his actual paintings. So you're going to get a lot more out of the next 45 minutes or hour or whatever it is if you can actually see some of his work. So what you should do right now is go onto Instagram and check out at levi.nelson.artiste. 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 Take a look at his work or scroll through it in real time as we have this conversation. So let's check it out. Roll tape. Okay, here we are. We're living it up with Levi Nelson, an artist. We're in Levi's studio in beautiful Mount Currie, British Columbia, right underneath the mountain of that name. And Levi, thanks for coming on the pod.
Yeah, thanks for coming out to my studio here in Mount Currie.
Yeah, so you're an artist, a painter. How old are you? Tell me a little bit about yourself. How did you get into, the arts and sort of just how did that journey start for you?
Well, I'm 37 and I'm just about to graduate from Emily Carr University from their 4-year Bachelor of Fine Arts program. And before I started school, I was living in a small mountain town called Salmo, where Shambhala takes place. And I was working in this pizza parlor. I had a number of different small jobs, but I wasn't happy at any of them. And one day I just kind of had it, and I was in the kitchen of this pizzeria, and I smashed this plate, and I kind of just, I can't be doing this with my life. I need to be doing something more. This isn't fulfilling.
Yeah.
I wasn't living to my full potential. I was also heavily drinking at the time. I'm almost 2 years sober today, but I had tried different professions since high school. Like straight out of high school, I went into fashion design. So I moved to Toronto for a little bit. Then 9/11 happened and I moved back. Then I kind of fell away from that passion. I was just a constant search for creative outlet. After that, I went into acting in Vancouver and graduated from the Capilano Acting Essentials course at that college there and worked in the movie industry for a bit. But I kind of fell away from that and soon found myself in Salmo where, that breakdown happened and I had to sort of re-examine my life. And I looked on the wall and I thought about these other paintings that I had. I saw one of my paintings on the wall that I'd done back in high school.
Right.
And I thought, okay. So throughout fashion design school and acting, I had always been painting.
Right. So it's been a steady through line kind of your whole life.
Right. Yeah. But I really only viewed it as a hobby. I didn't know it could actually have an entire practice around it and execute a vision and share the way I guess I see the world.
Yeah. And so, I mean, that breakthrough moment, the more recent stuff I've seen of yours, it's a combination of, traditional kind of Indigenous lines and stuff, but with a contemporary spin. Was that something that you had been examining, in your other arts and in your visual arts as a younger person, or is that sort of new since that watershed moment in Salmo?
When I was younger and in high school, I think a lot of the paintings I did were influenced a lot by surrealism and Salvador Dali, right. And of course Cubism and Picasso's sort of figurative works, and even psychedelic sort of type of artwork. That's what I did in high school.
Right.
I didn't really start to explore Indigenous arts until I guess it was when I started working at the Squamish Lil'wat Cultural Center in Whistler. And wow, I don't even know how long ago that was, 8 years ago.
Right.
But just being around that for a couple of years, surrounded by that kind of art, really influenced me.
Yeah.
And it speaks to who I am as a person. So it's a lot I guess I relate to the world mostly through an Indigenous lens, and so being able to create Indigenous art, but through a contemporary aesthetic, I guess, where Sitting Bull could be on the same painting as Snow White, and I'm talking about the hunter gatherer painting that I did for my Medicine Wheel series, or Rainbow Bright, who is in this painting here.
Right.
This is, I guess, an attempt of me trying to say, or not to be pigeonholed in simply Indigenous, authentic Native art gallery.
Yeah.
Which is beautiful. I mean, I think Northwest Coast art is beautiful, the carvings and the prints, but I'm a painter, and painting is a European tradition, and so I keep that in mind when I'm working. Is that I'm working in a traditionally European practice of oil painting, but I suppose there's this new drive of wanting to insert Indigenous bodies or Indigenous figures, contemporary Indigenous figures, into the museum and gallery spaces, as opposed to the artifacts that you find today.
So, from that watershed moment in Salmo where you decided, I'm going to put all my chips into this visual arts, this is going to be my new form of expression. Did you go from that right into school, or were you back in Whistler at the cultural center, or kind of how did it get from that point on to where you're now? This producing a lot of work and about to graduate, and you had some big shows. And what was it? What was the step process there? Was it was the path easy for you to get on once you made that decision?
Not at all. There was an extreme life-changing experience that took place, catharsis, I would even call it. Like I said, I was drinking quite heavily at the time, and I had been fired from my job at the SLCC.
Right.
Because I had just let alcohol take over my life completely. So then we moved to Salmo, where I stayed with my partner's family for about 3 years. And I had a number of jobs. I worked at the cold beer and wine store one day a week. I worked as a karaoke host on one day of the week as well. I worked at the golf courses as a head bartender. I ran the beer cart, and also in the restaurant. And all through all these jobs, I was allowed to drink, or I was drinking.
Yeah.
And I had entered into this sort of depression, I guess. And one of the outs was looking at Emily Carr University. I said, okay, maybe I could go to art school. What's the top art school in the world, or in Canada?
Yeah.
And Emily Carr University came up. So I found this old pizza box, a piece of charcoal. I didn't have any materials at the time, and I sketched out this Indian chief in a gas mask on the box, and then this other smaller painting of this wolf in transition that I did to put together for a portfolio. And I applied, drunk, wasted, and applying to Emily Carr, filling out this application form online. And then I sent it off. And progressively, within like a 2-month period, my drinking had gotten really bad. I was drinking a lot of vodka every day, like just to sort of, I had become dependent on it. Somewhere in that mess, I got accepted. And my mother came to visit my grandma, and they noticed I was extremely sick. Like, I was so unhealthy. I probably weighed 218 pounds, down to like 175 now again. And my grandmother said, wow, Levi looks really sick, because they had come for Mother's Day. I remember barfing my guts out in the hotel room one of the mornings after getting into their Mother's Day wine. And my mom contacted my partner, Rabbit, not too long after, and said, you have to fire him and send him home. He needs help. He needs to quit drinking.
Yeah.
It's starting to I could see he's really sick. And so my friends came to visit, and there was like a men's golf tournament, and I showed up to work extremely drunk, and I got fired. My partner was also my boss, and I just left. Started walking. I told my friends, we have to stay at a hotel tonight. We're out here, and then I made it to like Kelowna, where my younger brother lived, and ended up having like being cut off cold turkey, which I didn't know was potentially fatal.
Right.
And I ended up having a massive seizure, where I woke up in the intensive care unit, and my male nurse happened to be in AA and asked me what I wanted. And there's just a series of incidences after that led to me being helped. That male nurse, they had an Indigenous liaison person come visit me in the hospital. I went to my first AA meeting in the church, in the hospital, in a hospital gown with this,
With an IV.
with an IV,
Wow.
barefoot,
Wow.
and extremely ill, and from the hospital to detox, and then a treatment center in Kelowna, where I had to defer from the September intake of Emily Carr to January.
Right.
So I entered Emily Carr University sober with fresh eyes, and yeah.
And so was that sort of a goal that you were able to look towards? Like, okay, I've got to spend the next 4 months healing, and I have a path forward in January, and so that was beneficial to the getting sober and getting back on track. Or
Yes.
was it a difficult process?
Definitely.
I mean, it must be a difficult process. Did it feel like you were ready, or was it a battle the whole way? Or
It was a battle. It was a battle the whole way.
Yeah.
I used to sit by the river in Salmo and say the Serenity Prayer like you do in AA. But obviously that wasn't enough to help me quit drinking. I had to die. I had a near-death experience, which is a whole big part of the story that I'm leaving out about just seeing the white light and seeing dead relatives.
right.
Like it was that cathartic, and it was. I think art quite literally saved my life.
Yeah, awesome. I've known a lot of artists, and even throughout history, substance abuse and artists. There does seem to be a link there. Do you feel like just part of what allows you to tap into that creative part of the mind and the soul also leaves you a bit vulnerable to these other things creeping in and taking control? Or do you think there's a link between the substance part in your story and the fact that you're obviously this creative talent?
I think there could be a link, and it's probably related to just the amount of feels that we have as an artist,
Right.
as artists, as musicians or writers or painters or just creative types. I think that there's of course personal childhood trauma that probably plays into it, but
Yeah.
I think I know that I'm incredibly grateful for that experience. I know that it has sort of made me realize what is important and what needs to be prioritized in my life.
Yeah. And I wonder, has that experience played itself out in your work? I mean, I know you do a lot of, examining Indigenous stereotypes that our cultures have. And, of course, alcoholism and Indigenous is a commonly held stereotype in the colonial society for a long time. Have you spoken with that through your paintings, or is that something that you haven't dove into yet, that particular stereotype?
One painting comes to mind, and it's Nations in an Urban Landscape, which is a part of the O'Dane collection.
Yeah, yeah.
And it shows a sort of street scene of the downtown east side. And I guess this painting sort of touches on it. There's figures in the painting that are wearing masks from the Northwest Coast and also from the O'Dane collection, and some baskets from the Lil'wat Nation. And the painting takes its title from an essay written by Marcia Crosby, who's Haidat Simshin, and she's an art historian as well, really good art historian. Her writing, her papers have influenced a lot of my work.
Right.
And she speaks about in her essay, Nations in Urban Landscapes, about what she's questioning is how do indigenous people behave in urban settings when they're outside of their traditional territories, when they're away from home and in the city, and left vulnerable and open out there. And I guess what I wanted to do with that particular painting was to give them an identity. They're for their masks, the baskets, the bentwood box, are an attempt to say that these people have come from a very strong cultural background, but it has been interrupted quite violently through colonialism. And I think you could see that in the painting. There's an explosion in the background of an atom bomb going off, and it's interesting to think about. I guess I could sort of see it as a danger, as wanting to depict that too much in paintings. There's another painting called Trade Blankets, which has a person sleeping on the sidewalk, and they're covered in the Hudson's Bay blanket. They're wearing a pair of moccasins, and it's trade blankets with a question mark. And I guess I'm sort of also commenting on the history of colonialism and inequality. So
for that piece, for the O'Dane, I mean, that's, for the listeners that don't know, the O'Dane Art Museum is in Whistler. It's a very new, beautiful facility. Did you make that piece with that museum in mind? I know you said you have some of the masks, or was it a commission piece, or how did it, it's a great, I think a lot of people would consider a great honor to have a piece in that collection. Was that something that you went after, or did that just happen, or?
It wasn't a goal with that particular painting,
Right.
But I remember watching a documentary about Bo Dick, and I believe it's called Maker of Monsters, and they're interviewing one of his classmates that he went to school with at Emily Carr, who's now an art historian himself, and he's talking about Bo Dick and how when they were in school, Bo Dick was selling important pieces to the Vancouver Art Gallery. And I thought, I would really like to do that. I'd really like to sell to a major gallery while I'm still a student.
Yeah.
So that kind of just... I think I'm incredibly ambitious. And there was a point where I had a stockpile of paintings, and that started to sell, and collectors started to get interested in them. And in particular, one of my favorite paintings, Hunter Gatherer, and another one called After the Blast, which was for the poster of my first solo show.
Yeah.
I had some collectors interested in them, and I was kind of worried that they would just be dusty on somebody's wall. So I called up and sent an email to the O'Dane. I said, hey, I have these 2 paintings. Would you be interested in them for your collection? Very bold move.
Yeah. Which
Dr. Curtis Collins, who's been very supportive in my practice since that day, since I emailed him. He said, come to the O'Dane, bring your paintings, we'll have a look. So he took a look at my work and gave me a tour behind the scenes of the O'Dane, and just gave me a rundown on what they're doing there, what their goal is. And he said, come by on like a Monday or Tuesday when we're closed to do some sketches, sit with whatever you want to do.
Yeah.
Just come in, and if you want, you're welcome to do that. And so I said, sure, I'll come next week. And so I showed up next week and had the whole museum to myself and did some sketches of the masks there in the first room that you kind of go through there when you arrive. And I'm not too sure how that sort of evolved into Nations in an Urban Landscape, but it did. And it led to the beginning of an important relationship with the O'Dane. Curtis came to my first show. He saw that painting, which he hadn't seen before.
Right.
It was in my first solo exhibition, and then he invited me to apply for the Emerging Artist program through the O'Dane Art Museum and Royal Bank of Canada, in conjunction with Emily Carr's Fresh Seeing show that they had there last year. And so I went through that program, and the O'Dane has just been immensely supportive.
Yeah, and then you mentioned your first solo show, which was also in Whistler at the Moore Young Arts Center. Mm-hmm. I did see on your Instagram, sort of back from those times when you found in a public washroom, there was the newspaper and I think the pamphlet from Arts Whistler or something, but there's your work, and you commented about, that's one of the highest honors, to know that people are looking at your work while they're taking a dump.
Yeah.
Maybe, I mean, is that still something that you really value, that sort of touch to the common person, as well as these institutions of art?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's incredible it's an honor to have somebody want to live with your work of art on their wall.
Yeah.
And to have a relationship with that was something that has come from me, and I'd like to thank my soul.
Yeah, yeah.
Because I open myself up when I do my work. I think otherwise it's not worth it. And I think gender performativity, that painting that showed in the Bill Reed Resurgence in Digiqueer Identities show, was about two-spiritedness, and a lady saw it. It had already sold to a collector in Vancouver, but a lady had saw it who has a transgender daughter, and we've been emailing back and forth because they want to commission a painting a lot like that painting to speak about what it's like for their child's experience to go through being two-spirited or trans. But I think it's incredibly touching when people collect my work or have it on their wall and
or spend. I mean, I feel like when you're on the toilet, right? That's one of the few solely personal, private moments that people have, on a routine basis. So to be able to have your art, if they're dedicating their attention to your stuff, then,
right.
I always feel that way. Like, people read our Mountain Life magazine, like lots of times it's sitting on the back of the toilet.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
And to me, that's a great thing, because you're getting a little bit of a window into someone where they're almost forced to pay attention and be, in a vulnerable position to your art.
Yeah, maybe they'll carry something away with it.
What about just, we're here in your studio, and in behind you, there's a painting you're working on, and there's a couple local, sea to sky landscape, iconic mountains in there. Has coming from this area and growing up in these mountains and then living in the Kootenays amongst that beautiful landscape, does that inform your work, and in what way?
The forest is a place to go to recharge, and I've always had that connection, or the need to sort of slough off the day by taking a walk in the woods or walking to the river. Yeah. And when I was feeling broken, I found wholeness in the mountains. I think, to begin with, I'm already a spiritual person, but I remember sitting in on this talk and listening to a guy speak about addiction, and he said that, like, the opposite of addiction is connection. And this particular talk was about spirituality and how people struggle with the idea of spirituality. And he had mentioned, like, there's two ways to connect to the spirit. One is through nature, and the other is through art. And I think I've obviously accessed both of those, but the mountains, there's something so I don't know, I want to say cathedral-like about being in the woods. Even just wandering aimlessly through there, you feel this, I feel it anyway, some kind of, there's something happening out there. But yeah, this painting behind me, which I think working title right now is called In the Gloaming, but it features a vast landscape with two carved figures. And behind them in the very background, there is the black tusk, which is also known as the roost of the thunderbird, or place where thunder sits in Uqalmiyukt or Lil'wat language. Then there's Mount Currie in the center, and the two sisters on the very far right of the painting. When I was staring at this painting the other day, I kind of realized that a person who is indigenous to these areas would be able to look at this painting and tell a story about any one of these mountains. Like the two sisters, you could talk about the legend of the two twin sisters who brought peace between the Squamish and Tsleil-Waututh nations. And the Mount Currie, you could talk about Charlie Mack's story, how the animals and birds got their names. And then, of course, Black Tusk is a very sacred area to the Squamish and Lil'wat Nations and our connection to the Thunderbird. And I really like how this painting would be able to do that.
Yeah, and it's awesome, to think that from our perspective. I mean, I've lived, near each of those mountains, right? I've grown up in Whistler. I lived in Pemberton. I'm currently down in Squamish. So to think that for your graduation piece, for your grad show, you're including this whole region as part of the piece. I mean, it's to me, I think it's really awesome. Obviously, you must agree, or you wouldn't do it, right? But how about like on the recreational side? Do you snowboard, mountain bike? Do you partake in the landscape, in those means?
I used to snowboard. Originally, I was a skier. Then I tried snowboarding, and I don't really mountain bike or snowboard.
Yeah.
I haven't for a while, and recreationally, as far as the mountains go, it's interesting to think about, especially for this podcast and Mountain Life magazine, and the differences in the way the two different cultures approach nature.
Right.
One being recreationally, another one spiritually and medicinally. For instance, I was reading Art Manuel's Unsettling Canada, and he was talking about the early days of preservation and environmentalism, and how the environmentalist movement was separated from Indigenous issues in the beginning, because there's just a different relationship that Indigenous people have with nature, and collecting the materials for baskets, or hunting or gathering, or just going to the woods to recharge, versus Art Manuel was saying that environmentalists, and it's more of an aesthetic concern,
Right.
or like you said, recreation. And I remember taking a course with Dr. Cameron Cartier of Emily Carr University, and it was about land art, or working with nature to sort of understand ways of working with nature to create art. And she was talking about how in today's culture, that the woods are something that we go to, and it's something that's a separate from Western culture. Like, it's over there, and we have to leave to go to it. And I think that was an interesting point. But here in this area, I think everybody has definitely more connection to the mountains.
It's closer to us, right?
Yeah.
Than someone in the city. It's interesting because, I mean, you know, personally for me, I would definitely feel recharged after paddling a canoe across a lake, right? Just to get to the other side. But yeah, I feel like you know, there's a lot of that sort of when somebody's running up the chief, you know, to beat their personal record of running up the chief in a time frame, is that really utilizing the chief to its, you know, its greatest potential, or are you just really turning nature into you know, a fresh air stairmaster? And you know, I obviously everyone has a different opinion on all that, but I feel like for that dichotomy between the environmentalists and the indigenous cultures, maybe it seems like the Haida Gwaii was one of the first times where those two movements sort of combined. Haida Gwaii in the 80s, where they had to battle the logging.
Yes.
Do you feel like is there more synergy nowadays than, you know, when we were kids?
Definitely. I feel people like, I guess, generations of today who are fighting for the environment. Not everybody back in the 80s was had their eyes open to the destruction that people are doing to the planet.
Yeah.
But nowadays we are, because we could feel it, right?
Yeah.
It's affecting everybody.
Totally.
It's and it's interesting to think about how Western culture is really talking about the end of the world, and we're at, you know, 0 hour, and we have to turn it around now, or we're all going to die.
Yeah.
And there's like this sense of the apocalypse happening, or the end of a way of life. But one of my professors was pointed out that for Indigenous people, the world has already ended, and our way of life was cut off at first contact. But it's nice to see people catching up to the idea that that we need to, I don't know, take care of of our home.
It's interesting to see what role outdoor recreation plays in that. I mean,
Definitely.
I've always kind of believed, somebody said it, I think it was Jason Faulkner, but you can't expect people to care about something if they haven't been shown why they should care about it. And the idea being that if you get people out into nature, they'll somehow understand why this has its own intrinsic value. Now, is that actually happening? I don't know, because, you know, you still see a ton of garbage out in the trails, and it does feel like a lot of people are getting out there and not understanding that value. But I guess long run, hopefully it helps. Another way to show people that value is through art, right? And I know my buddy Chili was good at that, where you can kind of take the magic of nature and hang it on your wall inside the house, but still get a little bit of those feelings evoked. You talked about the end of the world from an Indigenous standpoint, and I do have a note here about Indigenous futurism, which I know you wrote about it, a phrase coined by Dr. Grace Dillon, Portland State University, and it's sort of, correct me if I'm wrong, but as I understand it, it's an artistic movement expressing Indigenous perspectives of the past, present, and future, but then kind of filtered through almost a science fiction or futuristic kind of filter. Some people would say that, I think the criticism there, one person said, a lot of Indigenous people don't have the luxury of really looking at that fixed future because they have been forced to have to struggle just to preserve their own past. Have you been considered as part of this Indigenous futurism movement, or what are your thoughts on that?
I've explored it, definitely, Indigenous futurisms, because it does sort of, it's a sort of anecdote to the idea that Indigenous culture is dead or dying or stuck in the past. Like, when you look at the artifacts in the museums, or there's just this broader understanding throughout Canada, this one of the way Indigenous people are. And I feel that Indigenous futurisms, the same way like Afrofuturisms, if you think about the Black Panther,
Sure,
and how they created this entire like Black World, and Indigenous futurism sort of does the same thing of it allows people to open up to the idea that there is a future, there is an Indigenous future, and it's not, and it's fused with it's fused with the teachings of the ancestors, and as much as it is with new technologies that are becoming available to us.
Yeah. And I mean, you look at, for Black Panther, for example, that's opening up, millions of people that probably would have limited or no exposure to any kind of Black history or Black culture. And then all of a sudden it's in, it's their new favorite movie. It's one of the best movies of the year. And so, it definitely is a way to share at least a part of the culture, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
and get new eyeballs on it, I guess.
Yeah.
You did just mention about the museums and that, and I know, it's not a lot of places you go, especially in Europe, you go into the museum and it's artifacts and artworks, but lots of them have been, stolen or swindled.
Mm-hmm.
And I know there's a movement to sort of reclaim or repatriate a lot of artistic works around the world. How does that play in, like, when you create art, are there pieces that you're like, this is never going to be in a gallery or museum? This piece I can let go out into the world, but this piece is going to stay special and be with my family or friends or my community? Or does that play a role? Those sort of, that repatriatism and that much long overdue movement, but does that play a role when you're creating those kind of thoughts?
Maybe because I'm an oil painter,
Right.
so the idea for the goal for my work is to have it in galleries and museums, and of course in people's homes.
Right. It's not like like a weaver or something.
Right, like if I were a carver of masks or poles or made baskets or stuck to more traditional forms of work, then that's a good question. I don't know. I feel, maybe a couple of my paintings are probably going to end up in a museum where they'll be preserved for a very long time.
Yeah.
But I definitely would want some of my paintings to still stay here in the community as well.
Yeah.
After I'm gone, or I know they have a few at the Tizio Learning Center. They have a painting of mine in their boardroom as well. I think they have 3 paintings in their collection. And yeah.
Do you get an opportunity to go work at the center there, at the Tizio Learning Center, or speak to younger kids from this area about your journey as an artist and just your life to sort of? I know when I was a kid we had Rick Harry. He would come up and
we did too.
Yeah, I mean we went to the same school, but yeah,
I know I'm working with him on a project.
And I somewhere have like a in a Coast Salish style a skunk that I did in grade 9, right? Very poorly, but he came and taught us that I think in those days, that's the 1990s, as a window into that world that wasn't there, rather than trying to turn us all into First Nations artists. But
Right.
Do you get a chance to sort of pass on that as well in that same manner locally here?
I've been invited to speak at the school. I've done an artist talk at the community school, and that was really nice. I've been invited to speak at the Squamish Lil'wat Cultural Center for their Aboriginal Youth Ambassador program, or I think it's called Indigenous, like IYA group now.
Right. They let you back in there?
Yeah. The talk hasn't taken place yet,
Right.
but I've been invited to, and I went through the very first program that
Right.
they had, and it helped to connect me back to my Indigenous culture.
Yeah.
And rekindle a sense of pride around that. There's been a few times where I've spoken.
What do you feel about, non-Indigenous people playing around with those traditional forms, with a traditional line work and style? I know it's, lots of artists that I know have all sort of gone through a phase where they studied it by doing it kind of thing. I don't know many that would sell that work, but is that a no-fly zone, or what are your thoughts on that for a non-Indigenous artist to play with, say a Haida carvings or a Coast Salish line work illustrations or?
That's a really good question, because I think it does come down to opinion, but I have seen work out there by white artists in the like a northwest formline style, and I think it's great to have a curiosity about other art forms, but there's a fine line between like if you're going to create art and make a living off of it, off of Indigenous art, and you're culturally appropriating a style of an Indigenous nation who has, experienced a lot of negative impacts from colonialism. So I think that could be another way of just recolonizing. But I would never come out to an artist that had done work publicly and shame them for it.
Yeah.
I would keep that opinion to myself. I've seen a piece recently that was done by a local artist who's white in the Indigenous style, and I just kind of pursed my lips because of its location. I was sort of forgiven. And then there's another artist, Sue Coleman, who's a white artist, but she has all of these. She's got work in every single native art gallery or gift shop that every museum in British Columbia, including the SLCC. And she recently got dragged through the mud on social media for her work. And I don't know. I know for sure that I don't have the authority to say that you can't do that.
Yeah.
And I don't know who does have the authority to say they can't do that. So that's where that lies with me.
And I mean, it feels like everything, the further we evolve as humans, the more remixed kind of everything starts to become too.
Exactly.
Right. Obviously with Indigenous art, it's a little bit different because, so much has been taken and that hasn't really been dealt with. But I mean, people are lifting from the European masters, and people are lifting from everyone else. So eventually, I think it's probably bound to happen.
Yeah, that's where there's this sort of tension between the tradition of being an artist and imitating the masters, and other forms of art, and because that's all about being an artist, about exploring Cubism, exploring form line, exploring Impressionism. Then there's, it's different because it's sort of like stealing. And then there's always, when it comes to cultural appropriation of Indigenous art from a Western artist, it's different just because of the history of colonialism.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but then again, like you said, as artists, we do borrow from, like, Pablo Picasso with the Iberian masks and how those influenced Les Demoiselles d'Avignon and his figurative works throughout his practice, or me going to the Museum of Anthropology
or your Dali phase when you're younger. Mm-hmm. I mean, you can still see hints of that in your work now.
Right.
Was it easier, or did it take a while for you to sort of find your voice? I know a buddy artist, Dave Barnes, his whole first show was just called The Search, and it was a bunch of different styles as he was kind of searching for what lit him up and where he could get into the flow and feel the best. Did you have a long search to find your unique style, or is it a never-ending search? Or
I think it's a process. Yeah. It's always unfolding, like a flower. There's these different layers that are opening up. If I sit back and examine my work today, I think I could see 3 different channels of different types of art happening. Like, there's the fine art oil paintings behind me. Then there are the sort of multimedia works of collage and acrylic and silkscreen on canvas. And then there's the more geographic, I guess, or like that painting there in the corner.
Yeah.
And there's these three sort of, I guess, emerging styles of art that I'm hoping will converge one day or meet up somewhere and sort of unify my practice, because I find that people in galleries, they want an artist to paint a certain way and then just only continue to paint that style of paintings.
Yeah.
So the goal for me is to have an identifiable style, but over a wide range of...
And that sort of pressure to be a certain way, do you feel like that's heightened as an Indigenous artist, where, now there could be this sense, or people projecting this sense that you now are a gatekeeper of a culture, or you have this duty to protect and educate and, innovate and just do all these things because, there hasn't been, it's only in the last not that long where a contemporary First Nations artist is even something that people would understand what it is. Does that come with an added bit of pressure on you from others or from yourself?
Definitely. I'm feeling it now, today more than ever, like starting to realize the impact that my work can have.
Yeah.
Recently, I just finished a painting called Shuli and it speaks about a dance that's indigenous to the Lil'wat Nation, about an elder named Shuli. But I borrowed a mask from the O'Dane collection that was carved by Frida Deasing, who is Haida, and she carved this old woman with Libret mask. And I used that mask as on the face of the dancer in my painting. And somebody had commented, that's not Lil'wat. We never wore those things in our lips. Where are you getting your sources from?
Right.
And I just ignored the comment. And I just sort of understood then that, okay, people are obviously taking my work seriously. I had posted another one of a little frog, a green frog in the Northwest Coast formline style. And the same person commented, "Oh, that's nice, but that's not Lil'wat. Everybody knows how to do Northwest Coast art.
Right. Right.
Just stick to that." And I'm like, I have to learn how to do everything.
Yeah.
I'm exploring all different Indigenous cultures across Canada and styles in order to understand it all. But yeah.
Yeah, it's tricky. I mean, the social media, I can sit literally like I did this morning in bed and scroll through your Instagram and see all this incredible work, where in the old days I would have had to have been, I would have had to have been your neighbor to see that variety. Mm-hmm. But then you also have to field these comments from, the internet experts, quote unquote. Is there, obviously so much of your work does have these really poignant, themes and messages. Is there ever times where you're like, hey, today I just want to paint a tree. Like, I don't want to have to speak to anything other than just, this is a beautiful tree and I want to sketch it? Or, like, do you have those kind of days too, where it's sort of an unplug, relax, not take it too seriously day?
Definitely. I when I'm in between paintings, there's an exploration that takes place on paper. And there's a freedom of hand in drawing. There's a, I don't want to say low quality, but it's just a really quick sketch. And I feel when I'm in that exploratory frame of mind is when I could kind of let go. But at the same time, I feel that the work needs to have a message. I want people to look and be able to think about something. It's nice to have a beautiful landscape on the wall, or a portrait too. But I guess who knows? I don't know why a lot of the work kind of unfolds in this almost political way that it does, or social commentary.
Like when you were starting in Emily Carr, did you have to paint a bowl of fruit?
We did still lives.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And is that something where you're like, this is super painful, or is it like, okay, I'm still learning and that's okay? And
I relished in that too,
right.
Because I was just natural at it, and learning. Like we even did nude studies, like a live nude model where the whole class is in a circle around them. I think all of these fundamentals of art are important, and I enjoy them because it's my passion.
What about other artists nowadays or past? I mean, you did mention a few influences when you were younger. Are there artists that you look to now, that you look up to, that you were inspired by, or anyone that you want to give a shout out to?
Sure. I'd have to say my oldest influences from when I was a child would have to be Lawrence Paul Yahuelapton and Rick Harry Cholacton, who also did come to my school in grade 3. And now I'm working with him on a project with the O'Dane, with him and James Hart of Haida Gwaii. Awesome. We're designing this public sculpture to sit out in front of the O'Dane. And Cholacton and I are designing the base for the Haida piece to sit on top of. And Sean Hunt came to my school and did a talk. His work is amazing. He's also a part of the O'Dane collection. Then there is, of course, Rebecca Bellamore, performance artist on Anishinaabe. And Kim Dorland, wonderful Canadian artist out of Alberta. His work is, I really like his style.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, if as we sort of wind it down here, if you, just your own long and twisted journey into this place where you are now, but if you're to say to, a young artist who maybe doesn't even have their own studio, I mean, actually, that's something I wanted to talk about. I did see another one of your posts that I thought was really, awesome. It shows your urine cup, and it says, hey, I'm still hoping to get heat and a window and some running water in my studio, but I'm also later today going to talk to the people at the O'Dane and just there's that classic artist thing of it's difficult, especially in this part of the world, to eke out even a space where you can do the art. Mm-hmm. It's not with an easel over your bed or something, and I don't think that's. And that's a problem for artists of any background around here. To a young kid like that who's, got their easel in their bedroom and working a couple jobs or whatever, delivering pizzas like you and looking to want to try and be an artist, what advice would you have for people like that or tips or tricks?
Well, the summer's coming, so that's a nice opportunity to work outside.
Yeah.
And I think if you have that drive and passion, it will happen. Robert Davidson said, just always keep making art. Just keep making art even when there's no orders coming in. Just continue creating. I think it's important to figure out what you want to say to the world if you have a message, and try to sort of hone in on that. But I think just keep at it. If it's something you love, I feel it's important to make your practice your best friend, like something you could go to when you're sad or angry or feeling completely inspired.
People are obviously listening here. It's a tough one to talk to a visual artist in a podcast format because we're really missing on all the beauty of the pieces, and we will have links and stuff. But if someone wants to see your stuff, where should they go?
You can check out my Instagram page at levi.nelson.artiste. And I also have a public album on my personal Facebook page But I mean, if you send me a friend request and I've never met you in person, I might not accept.
Yeah.
My Instagram is more public.
And it's loaded. It's loaded with beautiful stuff. So,
Sure.
Definitely, folks, make sure you hit that link and check it out. And Levi, thanks so much for hosting us up here at your studio in beautiful Mount Currie.
Yeah, thank you too, Feet. It's been amazing.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, Levi, and thank you to everyone for listening. I want to make a note here, a little aside, and I just want to point out that Levi and I had this conversation last June, which is quite a few months ago, and is before the discovery of 216 unmarked graves on the grounds of the residential school in Kamloops, BC, or the subsequent hundreds and thousands of other graves of lost children that have been discovered since then and that continue to be discovered. And that doesn't have a lot to do with this story, but that is still a shameful tragedy that would happen, that it would be allowed to happen. And the even bigger tragedy is that Indigenous people have known about this and have been talking about this for years, decades, and no one with the power to do anything seemed to be listening. It's shameful. And the effects of those schools, the trauma of that genocide, is intergenerational and is something a lot of Indigenous people are still battling through today. And there's a lot of work to be done in this country, in any country with roots in colonialism. And it's important to note that the task of doing that work needs to fall on the colonialists or the children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren of colonialists, as we're the ones who benefited from this brutal history and the system that it created, the system that still operates today. And yeah, hey, I know it can be a hard trip to navigate, even with the best of intentions. And I know for me, as I try to do my best to be a good person and do the right thing, be a positive influence on my son, on others, be empathetic to other people's lives and challenges, I know I'm going to make mistakes. We all are. But that's part of it. That's called learning, and that's called doing the work. So yeah, for me, reading the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada's final report was a good place to start for perspective and to learn some of the truths of what has gone on and what that means. That's a book, or you can find it online, and it doesn't have all the answers, but it's one place we can start, okay? And on that note, I want to acknowledge this pod was recorded on the unceded lands of the Squamish and Lil'wat Nations. I'm not calling it the traditional lands anymore because these are still the lands of those nations. They were never given away, and I think we all need to learn to share them better without cutting down every tree and sucking the minerals out of every mountain and poisoning every lake and shitting plastic all over every beach. We're all here on this land now, and we're enjoying these lands in every wilderness adventure that we do out there. Everything that makes this magazine and this podcast happen, it happens on these lands that we share. So how about we all just learn to work together, learn from each other, and build a better future hand in hand. Sounds easy, right? That's because it's the only real path forward. And I know that's a little bit heavy, but that's why it's important to say, and that's why it's important to address, and it's something I wanted to address. We also want to thank Shirai Rules for the intro voiceovers on this pod and every pod, and our go-to ball hockey goalie, Adrian Gendro, for the music. Next month, sometime next month, maybe next week, who knows, we've got Ian McIntosh, ski mountaineer, free ride legend, talking about his life on two planks, his future, and why women and mushrooms are the easiest way to save the world. We also have an old conversation I did with ski filmmaking legend Christian Beijing and Tavi Chetro from Heavy Hitting Films, talking about ski movies, talking about art. I told you art's everywhere. Talking about dirt bags and talking about the old days. So come on back for those. I'm not sure when they're going to drop, but we're going to just keep pumping these out. And until then, stay warm, stay dry, stay happy, stay stoked. And I'll catch you on the flip side. Winter is coming.